Hello, everyone. My name is Albert Bekfi. I'm the head of Pharmacovigilance Operations at Biomapas. And it is very exciting for me to be your host today at this webinar about pharmacovigilance opportunities in the MENA region. I personally think that this is still a little bit of uncharted topic in pharmacovigilance, and I do hope that you will learn something new during this webinar and you will go home with an extra information about this topic. So who we have, let me just quickly introduce who we have today here. Mina Avad is going to be one of the speakers. Mina Avad is a local pharmacovigilance expert in the MENA region, and he's joining us from the United Arab Emirates. And the other speaker is Martijn van der Leur, who is the head of global pharmacovigilance at Biomapas. He's joining us from the Netherlands. And well, of course, Martijn works for a CRO, but he has an extensive experience working for marketing or authorization holders. His past role was a deputy QPPV role at a large pharma in Europe. And actually, Mina and Martijn share some work history, and probably they will elaborate on this a little bit as we go forward. So a little bit about the technical part and agenda of the webinar. We are going to start this webinar with a short presentation about the region, about pharmacovigilance here in the Arab region. It's going to be held by Mina. Then we will turn this webinar into more like a casual discussion. I have plenty of topics. I would like to hear both Mina's and Martijn's opinion about these topics. Throughout the session, please feel free to use the chat box. Keep popping in as many questions as you would like to. And at the end of this hour, probably will save at least 15 or more minutes, depending how many questions are popping up. We will elaborate more on your specific questions, okay? Okay, so, but before I start, and I hand over to Mina, allow me to remind you a little bit about Biomapas. Biomapas is a clinical, regulatory, and pharmacovigilance solution provider with the global life science industry. We are on the market for 20 years, operate in more than 60 countries, with more than 100 customers, and with almost 300 employees. Biomapas covers almost every aspect of your product life cycle. From the development part, we do the strategic regulatory services and clinical safety. In the marketing authorization phase, we support and help with procedure management, PV system setup and maintenance. And of course, once you have your marketing authorization, you are on the market. We provide solutions and support with every classical regulatory and PV activities. Okay, so now I would like to hand it over to Mina, and let's start with a quick overview.
Thanks, Albert, and thanks everybody for attending the participation in the webinar. I'm very happy to just take you through, you can say, 15-20 minutes, a journey in the pharmacovigilance development, updates in the MENA region, how it is going, what is the difference between the EU pharmacovigilance and MENA region pharmacovigilance guidelines and the practices, the local requirements, the PSMF requirements, the adverse events reporting and management in the MENA region, medical information handling also. Then we can have, as Albert mentioned, Q&A session where Martijn could take us through the experience and the processes in the you can say globally, especially in Europe, from the Middle East. With respect to the difference between pharmacovigilance guidelines and the practice, the MENA region rather than the EU, basically one of the main differences is that unlike EU, you cannot find one pharmacovigilance guidelines for all the countries in the MENA region. And basically, we can differentiate the countries in the MENA region: Arabic-speaking countries or Arab countries, and other MENA region countries. So we do not have one guideline for pharmacovigilance for all the MENA region countries. We have the Arab guidelines for the Arabic-speaking or the Arab countries, as well as different other local guidelines like the Iranian guidelines and Israeli guidelines. Yeah, for the Arab guidelines, which is the main guidelines governing all, I can say 90% of the countries, it's nearly more or less the same like the EU one. However, the main difference and the most important difference is that the Arab guidelines are not obligatory or mandated by law for all the countries as EU GVP. Different countries, different Arab countries in the region have their own guidelines, which is basically referencing the Arab guidelines, but differs in the maturity of requirements and implementation for the pharmacovigilance activities. Some countries are very new in the implementation and very young in the implementation of pharmacovigilance, as Qatar, for example, Bahrain, and some are much more advanced like Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan. When we come to the local QBPV requirements and facts in the MENA region, and as per the Arab guideline, it's almost the same like the EU GVB with minor difference. As I mentioned, the main difference that each country adapt the guidelines locally. In most cases, there is a requirement for the availability of local responsible person for pharmacovigilance in each country. And basically, in many of the cases, the local safety person may be resident on the same country or not, but in most of the cases shall be resident in the country. For countries like Egypt, you can see the requirement of the availability of local pharmacovigilance responsible person, QBPV, and deputy, which should be nominated. In other countries like Oman, the local safety officer could not be resident in Oman, could be resident in any of other GCC countries. And as I mentioned, it differs from country to country, where the most advanced is Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, United Arab Emirates, and then you can find different degrees of maturity. Also, when we come to the legal accountability, in many of the countries, the legal accountability is not, I can say, it is not an issue, but in the advanced countries with respect to pharmacovigilance, like in Saudi and Egypt, there is a legal accountability as that is happening in the EU for the nominated local QBPVs and deputies. When we come to the PSMF requirements, the pharmacovigilance system master file, yes, there is a requirement in nearly all the countries, all the MENA region countries, for the submission, except one or two countries, for the submission of the global or European PSMF and summary within the registration dossier of any new product. And in some countries, as in Egypt and Saudi specifically, there is a requirement for submission of local, what we call here in the region PSSF, which is a pharmacovigilance subsystem file, which is more or less a PSMF-like document. It's like the EU PSMF, but it focuses on the local pharmacovigilance activities and the local pharmacovigilance systems in the countries, whether in Egypt and Saudi, and should be submitted within the registration dossier and should be maintained regularly and updated. In Egypt, the PSMF and PSSF are evaluated by the regulatory authorities, regulators, and a report is released for the company, and at the end you should have an approval certificate for the PSMF or PSS. Adverse event in the Middle East, more or less, we are the same like the EU. The timelines for reporting to the authorities is 15 calendar days for the serious cases, 90 for the non-serious. There is sporadic, or can say some local requirements regarding the reporting timeline for different countries, like in Sudan, the reporting timeline for adverse drug events or ICSARs is 7 calendar days, not 15, which is actually very challenging. But putting in consideration that the requirement is to report only the local cases, not the international cases. In Saudi Arabia, we are discussing nowadays with authorities, there is a draft guideline in place where they stated the requirement of reporting international cases as well for the serious reports, which is a little bit challenging if you're working for a global pharmaceutical company. You can imagine that there is a requirement to report to Saudi FDA, can say hundreds of reports a month. So the pharma companies are discussing with the regulators nowadays. We're trying to reach this, you can say, a practical approach of reporting in order not to report all the international serious cases, especially that they are reporting in the relevant regulatory authorities. Yeah. Regarding the nature of the required reports, we are the same as the EU. What is required for spontaneous reporting is the adverse events. In Saudi, 1 year ago, a new circular is released, and it will be added in the coming updated version of the guidelines, where there is a requirement for reporting lack of efficacy reports within 15 calendar days as serious reports, and quality complaints immediately. With respect to the forms and the files, the file formats, I can say in different countries, they can accept the Siamese form, but now there is a shift for all of the countries nearly, most of the advanced countries where there is local pharmacovigilance guidelines to report in the XML format, whether or 2 or 3, it differs. Either directly you can import it from the company or the global database to the through a gateway to the authorities, or by email. It differs from country to country. The most advanced, as I mentioned, in Saudi and Egypt. In Egypt, you can directly import through the gateway to the regulatory authority.
Mina, allow me to, I know I'm not supposed to ask questions now, but this seems rather interesting. Are there any plans, or are there already any country-specific E2B fields that would be specific for Egypt, for example?
For the time being, not yet, because actually but you know, there is a determinant for the for the country itself, for Egypt, for Saudi.
Mm-hmm.
But still they are accepting to send the report through email to the regulatory authority, and they can adapt the fields to
okay.
push
So
it to the database. Yeah,
it's good to know that they're still quite flexible with this. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, still. For the medical information in the Middle East, we don't have regional or local guidelines. Most of the pharma companies follow their own global procedures. However, there is a requirement for the presence of a local medical information responsible person and procedure in place to be accountable for managing of the adverse of the medical information. Also, as we all know, there should be the reconciliation of the medical information to detect any adverse events and report to the pharmacovigilance, and I can say a practice of routine reconciliation between medical affairs and pharmacovigilance responsible person at local level, which is basically managed through the global and local procedures. I believe now we have come to the end of the session. Actually, I didn't calculate how many minutes I took. Maybe I think 15.
On time, Mina. Exactly. Perfect, I think.
Thank you.
So guys, let's get into, thank you for the overview. I think it sets the scene quite well, and allow me to go into some of the topics. And the first one would be a bit more generic, and I know we probably all of you talked about it in the past. I'm really curious about, you know, in Europe at least, we are almost over with the pandemic. We kind of managing it quite well, but the COVID-19 brought a lot of things to many industries, including pharmacovigilance, and I wonder, all these changes, how could it impacted pharmacovigilance in Europe, and of course very much in the MENA region. I don't know, Martin, if you want to start.
Yeah, of course. Hi, everybody. I'm happy to start, although the European perspective is maybe not the most interesting. I guess many of us in the audience here are European, so we all share a bit the same experience by now, that in the beginning there were maybe some, you know, inconveniences switching from the office to home office all of a sudden. Maybe not everybody was prepared, but I think very soon we realized life goes on, and it even has advantages working from home. And that's what we did, of course, with many of us, just continue our regular work from home. What I am more interested about, I have honestly no clue. Mina, how was that for you and in your region? Was it similar?
Yeah, actually, there were great changes during the pandemic and post-pandemic, and just we were discussing, especially in pharmacovigilance and even communication with the authorities. There was a great shift. We had a lot of documents that were before COVID submitted on paper, shifted to electronic submissions, virtual meetings, even with the pharmacovigilance committees, with the regulators. They even accepted the electronic signatures for the documents, which I believe it's a great shift here in the Middle East. At the beginning, we were challenged a lot for every document, the signature, the stamp, the authentication. This is from, I can say, from the administrative perspective, but technically from pharmacovigilance perspective, the pandemic, the pandemic scenario and the reporting of adverse events from the vaccines created, I can say, a great interest from the health regulators and from even the high officials in the countries. For example, in countries like Qatar and Kuwait, specific simple guidelines were published for reporting of adverse events with respect to COVID vaccines only, which increased the awareness of reporting and pharmacovigilance. Also, some of the countries released digital applications, mobile applications to report adverse events. I believe the awareness within the public and within the healthcare practitioners for reporting adverse events increased a lot. And what I most like is the shifting to the office, to the home office module of working. You can see countries even like in UAE, most of the people now in different disciplines, not in pharmacovigilance only, working from home most of the time. Even the working hours in the country changes to lessen to be 4.5 days. Yeah, it's great impact.
So to stay in our terminologies, this sounds like a very positive side effect of the whole thing.
So
it sounds like the revolution might have been even bigger in your region than here. It sounds very good, actually, what you described. Yeah.
Yeah, I like, even though I had a conversation with the colleagues last week, and we were just laughing. You see, we have our meetings, our follow-up meetings virtually from different countries in the MENA region. Yeah. Wow. Yes. Very positive.
Good. Good.
Very, very interesting. So yeah, there is then a little bit of a shift and of more awareness now, even to pharmacovigilance, and maybe some of the authorities are waking up about the importance of PV, and that's always reassuring to see that. The next question is to you, Martijn. How do you see why this region is important from an EU headquarters perspective? Why this region challenging, important, or yeah, I'm curious about your thoughts.
Okay, so I'm talking very much from European perspective. I always worked for European companies in headquarters of European companies. And sometimes we think maybe in Europe that we invented GVP. Well, in a way, that's maybe true, at least if you look at the first real good pharmacovigilance practice modules, these were the EU ones in the year 2010. But if you look, what was the first region after that as a whole region to come up with very similar modules? That was the Arab League, the Arab region in the, I think 2015, am I right, MENA? When this was first?
Yes, 2015, the first version.
So that's only 5 years after the EU. And nowadays, if you go to PV conferences, everything is about globalization of legislation, or actually not even unification, but more, regional varieties to the same legislation or different, very different challenge or very complicated. But in a way, I believe the Arab League and the MENA region was the first to really adopt very similar legislation. And that, from my perspective, when I was involved in a pharmaceutical company, for us was obvious, if, we already had so much work in the EU to follow these modules, then if another big region starts doing the same, that means they will increase attention with their health authorities. We were honestly a little bit afraid, like if we get such strict rules in another region, we need to pay much more attention to that. And that's where we started really with my previous company working on the Arab region as our first next prominent region next to EU and of course United States, but that was established already. So yeah, that was very obvious for us.
I don't know, Mina, how do you see why? I mean, do you agree with Martijn or?
Yeah, totally agree with Martijn. Can say that the MENA region is the first region after the EU specifically and US, of course, that started to implement robust pharmacovigilance system requirements. But what is good for the MENA region is that it took the EU guidelines as a reference when creating the guidelines for the Arab countries, even for other MENA countries like Israel and Iran. The regulators took the reference for their guidelines, the EU one, which facilitated a lot of things and also created a need for integration and collaboration between the local pharmacovigilance persons, colleagues in the region with the EU and global colleagues. So absolutely agree.
So Martijn, you mentioned that. So this is almost the second big region that came up with their own regulation. It's been ongoing for almost 7 years now, and still I sense sometimes that, and from EU HQ perspective, it's not so easy to make sure everything is compliant in the MENA region. Why is it challenging, Martijn, to make sure everything is fine, everything is compliant in the region?
That could be a question for this region, but also for other regions. First of all, just to rephrase a little bit what I said, it's not that the Arab region was the second region to do PV legislation. That's not true, of course, but more GVP-like, because we could talk about Japan or others who are out there for a long time with different legislations. But this GVP-style legislation, and then looking at companies, even very big companies, where they have presence themselves with their own affiliates. I know I worked for a company who was quite strong in Europe, had their own affiliates in the most prominent countries in Europe, but for sure not in the Middle East, not at all. But of course, selling product there through a network of distributors, commercial partners. And then what usually happened was that, well, sometimes our commercial teams were very enthusiastic, so they had closed the deal already before we even knew there was a deal. That's another problem, but okay. Usually the agreements were then like, we anyway don't have people ourselves in the region, in the countries. Pharmacovigilance needs to be covered. So you know what, let's put it as a separate agreement to the commercial agreement as an annex, that pharmacovigilance is covered by our local distributor or commercial partner in the country. On paper, that may look nice. In practice, we always got a very uncomfortable feeling, because sometimes through audits, for example, we realized that the people we were talking to, they didn't even understand the most basic terminology, let alone being compliant. And that in a region where legislation is developing fast, where we could expect inspections at some point, the best we could do, I think, is take control in the region by putting at least one coordinating person on top of this whole network of separate distributors, commercial partners, etc. That was when we first started talking about our Arab QPPV, for example.
Mm-hmm. And how do you see this, Mina? Because throughout our previous discussions, I understand that it's also, I mean, it's completely manageable, but you also see some challenges there. And then, you know, it's probably not so straightforward to manage the region, even if you are there and you are there locally. There are a couple of threats.
Yes, and in addition to what mentioned by Martijn, which is absolutely a challenge, I can add, from my perspective, I see the culture cultural and language challenges are, 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 are of great importance. And if you remember, Martin, we worked together before. Yes, we spent, we can say, days for meetings, just saying, for example, that you perceive in the EU marketing authorization in a different manner that we perceive in the region, different terminologies. The language, Arabic language, is not that easy. The culture itself, how to communicate with the partners, even with the healthcare practitioners. So the cultural and language perspective is a great challenge. And this created the need, as Martin mentioned, at least to have a person in place in the region to coordinate all these and to ensure the true implementation of pharmacovigilance. I think one of the other most important challenges is that in the Arab region you can find different local guidelines, although we have the Arab guideline, which is the reference one, but the implementation differs from country to country. The local guidelines differs a lot from country to country. Even the exceptions or the exceptions and from the authorities that you can get in different country in a country differs than the other country. The maturity of the systems, the exact requirement, the exact legal accountability of the person. Yeah, these are challenges, but I can say these challenges created the importance of working in the MENA region and trying to find solutions and to have thoughts, communication, collaborations, meetings, webinars like that, even meetings with the authorities to sort out these and create a global module that can fit with the requirements within the region. And at the end, this increased the awareness, the need of pharmacovigilance in the region.
Thank you, MENA, for sharing. So, Martijn, let's say in an ideal world, you can really set up how you would like to work together with the MENA region, how you want to manage it. What's the most convenient setup, what you reckon, from an EU HQ perspective to manage the region?
Yeah, convenient sounds like we have maybe endless budget, or I'm thinking. Well, no, okay. Let me say then, convenient plus practical.
Yes.
Or, I would start with it. It depends on the number of countries you're operating in the region. If that would be 1 or 2, I mean, you could maybe work with just the local people in those 2 countries, and it depends a little bit on the infrastructure you have yourself, how your organization is set up. If you have a regional structure, for example, with coordinators for Europe and maybe North America and maybe some rest of the world, then adding 1 or 2 in that region for 2 countries could be feasible. But as soon as it gets more than 2, I would already start thinking of a more central coordinator for the region. The other reason for that is that even within 1 country already, if I talk with 3 different experts on that country, I sometimes hear different things. So that is where the additional value of that central coordinator comes in, who has the strong knowledge of the whole region, who has multiple contacts to verify information. So I would say from 2 countries or more onwards, I would go with a central coordinating person, and you can call it Arab QPPV, you can call it regional lead. To me, it doesn't matter. That's not really a legal need, that role, but it would be the convenience, as you say, for myself to have that person in the region.
So, MENA, just to clarify, there is no actual legal requirement to have like an Arab or MENA QPPV per se. It's more like local requirements.
Yes, there is no legal requirement to have such regional QBBV. However, what is usually practiced in the region that these coordinator, pharmacovigilance lead, or regional QBBV is nominated basically, or could be nominated basically for different countries.
Oh. And
yeah,
how does
in
it
some
work?
cases.
So one QPPV can be nominated for several countries without residing in them.
In some countries, yes. Yes, in some countries, especially for the GCC countries, for example, the requirement for UAE to have a local resident person responsible. But in Oman, the requirement is to have a local QBBB that may not be resident in Oman. So you can have these regional QBBV nominated in more than one country, in addition to fulfilling the role of coordination, as Martijn mentioned, to first make the best use of resources for the company itself, and to assure the fulfillment of local requirements in each country, and the true and compliant BV practice.
Thank you. And what is the current trend? Marketing authorization holders, do they employ one or maybe multiple local representative, or do they outsource?
That's a very good question. I like to speak on this because actually this differed a lot pre-COVID and post-COVID. Oh. Yeah, I can say in the past, 2015 till, can say 2019 or even 2020, the trend was just to hiring one person, regional person who will be responsible for managing the region and to be the point of contact between the headquarters in the EU and the US and different countries and the local affiliates and partners, distributors in the region. But it shifted a lot nowadays. We see a lot of big pharmas, medium-sized pharmas, even small pharmas, is in favor of outsourcing the pharmacovigilance activities to CROs, as they have the experience. They could have the experience and could fulfill the requirements and do the pharmacovigilance activities on their behalf more compliant. So there is a great shift, I can say, the last 2 years to outsourcing, which is, I can say, I do expect within the coming 2 years we will see a lot of changes in the approach.
There would be so many other questions I would ask about local QPPV role, but I'm just trying to be cautious about time. We just delve into these topics. So how any reaction from inspectors, from health authorities to this outsourcing? Do you have any experience, MENA, in any local inspection? And also, like, allow me to elaborate on this question. Are there any like European legislators, authorities interested in the region? Like, do you get an inspection because of the European marketing authorization, and they just investigate how MENA is covered? I'm curious how they react, and do they like this that is outsourced? Do you have any experience with this?
Yeah, you have asked 2 questions.
I did, sorry. I did.
No problem. Yeah, that's fine. Basically, regarding the regulators and the regulations and the relation between the regulators at the local level and the outsourcing, yes, we can is that there is a lot of acceptance nowadays from the regulators. You can say, for example, in Saudi, the coming update in the Saudi guidelines is putting in consideration a lot the outsourcing of BV activities, which was 2 years ago in Saudi very, very difficult. You cannot find robust guidance about the outsourcing. Nowadays, no, there will be even update in the guidelines. So the regulators, based on the practice of the companies and the shifting toward outsourcing, they are now dealing and accepting the concept. They are changing the guidelines and more legalizing or putting frameworks for the CROs and outsourcing companies. This is with respect to the local authorities. For the inspections and the relation between the European inspections and European audits, I can tell you my experience, and actually I love to speak about this topic. Actually, a couple of years ago, we had in the company an inspection from the EU, and I was involved with the communication with the EU QPPV, with the pharmacovigilance head at the EU level, and all the team, the case processing team, all the team, and I was involved, and my expectation was that, as usual, I will not face any questions, any requests from the auditor. And even when I give report to my line manager at local level, I said, yes, we have an inspection, EU inspection at the headquarters, but it's far away from us. I do expect that we will receive no requests. But what really amazed me, and I liked even the inspector at the time, that I received a couple of pre-audit requests from the auditor regarding the reconciliation of the adverse events with the partner in Saudi. So I can say, yes, there is focus from the EU regulators. I saw this. I didn't expect before, but nowadays I see they focus in other regions rather than European region. And here is the other side of I think, the equation, that even the EU regulators nowadays see the MENA region as an important region, and as a region has impact on the overall and the global pharmacovigilance system in the companies, and they are focusing. I hope I have answered the question. Huh?
You did. Thank you, MENA. And the second question was the trend, more and more outsourcing in local PV activities. Do inspectors agree with that? Have you received any feedback? It can be good or bad, right? I'm curious what you've seen so far.
Be honest with you, in the past, the perception was that you are outsourcing the pharmacovigilance activity in the region because you, as a pharmaceutical company, you don't like to do the pharmacovigilance activity. This was the perception, but after the involvement of I can say, well-known CROs and committed CROs, and a lot of meetings with the authorities, they found the opposite, that the companies are doing that because actually they are looking for a trusted CRO, trusted experts, trusted qualified person to perform and fulfill the requirements without carrying the burden of hiring persons, without carrying the burden of resources. So they found themselves in the other side. Why not? But the challenge here is to assure that the CRO is approved, has qualified persons fulfilling the obligation and the requirements. So there is a change in the mindset now, a great change, a great acceptance. Of course, for some countries, still they are not accepting, but in most of the big, when I say big, with respect to pharmacovigilance and the advanced countries like Saudi and Egypt, it's much more accepted.
But Albert, if I could make the link to European Union, it's obviously a bit the same here. Basically, the thinking is you can outsource whatever you want, as long as you do it with the right quality, the right oversight. There's increased attention from inspectors on that at the moment. And even in recent discussions on a conference where I was, the question to the audience was, can you outsource your EU QPPV? There were mixed opinions, people with good experiences, bad experiences. But the conclusion was, if it's a reliable partner and you can demonstrate your oversight, then of course it's fine. And I believe that's also what MENA is saying about the Middle East region.
Yes, exactly.
Thanks for sharing. Yeah. Just again, try to be cautious about time because because this was a very interesting topic. But I see a lot of questions already popping up in the questions tab, and you know we tend to have maybe 10 more minutes. Maybe we can overrun a little bit, a few more minutes, but yeah, we don't really have more than 10-15 minutes for this webinar. But before we start with those questions, just maybe one last topic about adverse event reporting and collecting of adverse events in the region. MENA, maybe because of the pandemic, other reasons, do you see an increase in volume in terms of adverse event reports? And then what would be the main sources of these adverse event reports? Physicians, patients, any patient support program or solicited programs that getting more attention in the region?
Yeah, see, Albert, it depends basically on the nature of pharmaceutical product, biological product, the nature of the product itself and the company. I can see that for biological companies, biological products, yes, there is a lot of PSPs. Even there is a trend for home nursing programs in some of the countries in the MENA region, which generate a lot of reports. Yes, there is an increase. And for the spontaneous reporting for different pharmaceutical products, post-pandemic, yes, as I mentioned before, the awareness has much increased, even within the public. For example, if you remember, one of the famous adverse events that happened in the different vaccines, for example, the blood clots. Yeah, this raised the awareness for within the population. I can see, yeah, there is an increase. Absolutely, there is an increase in the reporting from healthcare practitioners, even from the public and patients themselves.
Thank you, MENA. Okay, let's go into the questions that the participants ask. So a few things about adverse event reporting. What I think we answered is cases that occur in EU, do they need to be submitted in the MENA region in any country? So foreign cases in MENA, any country, would they be needed?
As I mentioned, for now, in most of the countries, this is not needed, but there is draft guidelines in Saudi that discussing to provide the international cases. As we are speaking basically at the spontaneous reporting. Of course, for the aggregate reports, it is required.
Okay. Another interesting question, very different one, from very technical, but I see where is it coming from. any application with artificial intelligence applied has ever been implemented in the region, or do you know any of this? I think this is still a hot topic.
Yeah, you cannot say artificial intelligence. It's a matter of just like mobile app applications and mobile tools to report. But rather than that, you cannot say that it's we cannot say we are using robots, for example, in processing the cases or managing the cases in the region. So it's a basic mobile applications.
Okay, so go ahead, Martin.
Yeah, I'm thinking this is close to my heart. If it would be in Middle East region, I would be very interested, because then it should be in the rest of the world as well. You know, this is such a hot topic, but people confuse sometimes artificial intelligence with basic automation, rule-based, you know, and that's happening throughout the industry. If it's a safety database with some automated rules, or for example, in the intake absorbing information, yeah, that could happen in Middle East if you have such technology, I guess, as well.
Yeah.
But I would be surprised, Mina, if there would be anything more advanced that we would not have here that you would have in the region, or?
No, we don't have. We don't have. It's unlikely to have such developed. And when we speak about artificial intelligence, it's something advanced, and we don't have the technology itself in the region. We usually export it from different countries. So
yeah, exactly.
basically,
that's what I mean. You know, no offense to Middle East region. I would expect if it's available out there that it would be in your region, in my region, anywhere. But that's what everybody's searching for. The real artificial intelligence to me means self-learning systems. And I think we're still 2 phases before that.
yes, we still we have a lot of application from artificial intelligence perspective, maybe in the banking sector, but not yet in the pharmacovigilance range.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, guys. I see very good questions, honestly. There's a question about the possibilities in a MENA region. The question comes like, the MENA region is very dynamic. PV is getting more and more interest. Do you see the need of external pharmacovigilance talent needed there, work locally, like you know, foreigners coming to the MENA region to work in pharmacovigilance? Do you, or you know, the language barrier would not allow this to happen?
Yeah, well, the language is a barrier, because there is a requirement to be an Arabic speaker. However, you can find a lot of expats Arabic and work in pharmacovigilance in the region. But yet, yes, there is a possibility.
Mm-hmm. But at the moment, maybe the language is still an important factor. It's in Europe, I think it was, and now it's
in different countries.
I think MENA is breaking up a little bit.
Yeah, connection.
Yeah.
Okay.
Until MENA is back, may I jump maybe a little bit on the talent discussion, because I could imagine this is not only in Middle East, but everywhere there is a hunt for talent, or the talent doesn't even exist that we need, because sometimes the business expands so fast that there's simply not enough people. That is what I could imagine for Middle East to happen, certainly as well, because there the whole development is even going much faster with requirements versus where do you get people with experience. You need to start somewhere. And you know, Albert, what we do in Lithuania is that we build our own talent pool. I could imagine for Middle East, such things would also need to happen. And then why not, if you have PV experts from abroad who need to learn Arabic language, or people speaking Arabic who needs to learn pharmacovigilance, whatever works, would be my view. But MENA, what do you think?
Yes, absolutely. The main challenge is the language, but why not? As you mentioned, I have friends, some of experts who learned Arabic working in pharmacovigilance, although they are little, but why not? There is, for some countries, example for Saudi, there is a need to have Saudi national. So here we are not speaking about only the language, we're speaking about the nationality itself. But in different countries in the region, yeah, why not? I think, Martin, also it depends on the progress of pharmacovigilance in the region itself. Because if we have requirements, if we have a market for pharmacovigilance, a need for pharmacovigilance experts and specialists, of course, this will create opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
And then we kind of on time, I think we have the 1 hour session now.
Albert, you know what I'm thinking? I see so many questions and requests for further information. I think we need to think a little bit offline how we can come back to maybe some of the remaining questions, or people asking if we can publish something, make things available. I guess we can take this offline, think a little bit, and come back maybe to the audience.
I think, yes, that would be the easiest way. And also, this session will be available for everybody online to review, or somebody who couldn't join, this is going to be available for everybody. Just wanted to share, this was one of the questions from the question and answer. Maybe one more thing, MENA. Are there any differences in terms of local literature monitoring in the region compared to EU, or it's basically roughly the same?
Yeah, basically it is the same. Different, as I mentioned, regarding the maturity of implementation in some countries, there is no requirement for local literature review or screening. And the main issue here is that the number of local publications in the MENA region is still much less than the European one.
Mm-hmm.
And mostly all the global literatures and journals are screened by the global teams in the pharmaceutical companies. So we have to assure not to duplicate the process and perform the screening for already screened journals.
Thank you. So there are still a couple of questions. We didn't have time. Some of them were very specific and lengthy ones. So thank you for asking them. We will try to get back to those, or maybe in writing or in a white paper or something like this that would make sense. I don't know, Martin, what you think, but we definitely address them. And
yeah, absolutely. And I had the feeling already, we were joking, we could also talk for half a day. Maybe that's not healthy. But yeah, we will think how to come back to the remaining questions. And at least thank you all also from my side for your interest in this.
Thank you very much for everybody. MENA, Martin, it was a pleasure. And thank you for all the participants and for the great questions. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.